The day of my father's funeral dawned cold and gray, fitting weather for what would become the most pivotal moment of my life. I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my simple black dress, the best I could afford on a research assistant's salary, while my stepsister Vanessa's words from last night's wake echoed in my head. God, Sarah, couldn't you at least pretend to dress appropriately? It's embarrassing enough having you here. My father, Dr. David Chen, brilliant scientist and family disappointment, according to my stepmother Isabella, had died suddenly of a heart attack in his small laboratory on the outskirts of the city. The same laboratory where he'd spent countless nights after being kicked out of the family mansion 5 years ago, when Isabella decided his obsession with failed experiments was too much to bear. The funeral was being held at the Chen family estate, a sprawling mansion that had once been my childhood home. Now it felt like enemy territory. As I walked through the ornate gates, memories flooded back. Dad teaching me chemistry in the kitchen, conducting experiments with baking soda and vinegar, his eyes lighting up when I asked questions about his research. Well, look who decided to show up. Isabella's voice cut through my reverie. She stood at the top of the marble stairs, a vision in designer black, her perfectly manicured hand resting on the banister. Next to her, my stepsister Vanessa smirked, both of them looking more like they were attending a fashion show than a funeral. It's my father's funeral, I replied quietly. Of course I'm here. Ah yes, your father. Isabella's lips curved into a cold smile. The brilliant Dr. Chen, who chose his precious experiments over his family's reputation. Tell me, Sarah, did he ever manage to create anything worthwhile in that rusty lab of his? Or did he die as he lived, a failure? I felt my hands clench into fists, but kept my voice steady. My father was not a failure. Really? Vanessa chimed in, her diamond earrings catching the light. Is that why he was living in that disgusting little lab while we maintained the family's social standing? Face it, Sarah, he was an embarrassment, just like you. The funeral service was torture. I sat in the back row, watching as Isabella played the grieving widow perfectly, accepting condolences from Silicon Valley's elite with graceful nods and dainty dabs at dry eyes. The true irony was that half these people hadn't spoken to my father in years, not since Isabella had systematically cut him off from his social circles. And now, the priest announced, Dr. Chen's widow would like to say a few words. Isabella glided to the podium, a picture of elegant grief. David was a dreamer, she began, her voice thick with fake emotion. Perhaps too much of a dreamer. He chose to pursue his unique ideas rather than focus on our family business. But he was a good man in his way. I wanted to scream. This woman had no right to talk about my father. She hadn't seen him in the last 5 years, hadn't witnessed his dedication, his passion, his absolute certainty that he was on the verge of something revolutionary. After the service, as people began to disperse, Isabella cornered me by the refreshment table. Now, about your father's lab, she said, dropping all pretense of grief. I'll be sending people to clear it out tomorrow. Whatever junk he left behind will be disposed of. You can't do that, I protested. That lab was his life's work. Actually, I can. The property belongs to Chen Industries, which as CEO, I control completely. Your father was merely allowed to use it out of my generosity. She smiled, showing perfect white teeth. Unless, of course, you can afford to buy it. We both knew I couldn't. My salary as a research assistant barely covered my rent in a tiny apartment. I thought not, Isabella continued. Don't worry, I'll have them throw away his things with all the respect they deserve. She paused, examining her manicure. Oh, and Sarah, don't bother coming back to the mansion. Now that your father is gone, there's really no reason for us to maintain any pretense of family ties. I left the funeral with tears burning in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Instead of going home, I drove straight to Dad's lab. The small industrial building looked shabby compared to the mansion. But to me, it had always felt more like home than that cold, perfect house ever did. Using my key, the one thing Dad had insisted I always keep, I entered the lab. The familiar smell of metal and chemicals wrapped around me like a comfort blanket. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. Equations scrawled on whiteboards, computer screens displaying complex molecular structures, and his old leather notebook sitting on the main workbench. That notebook. Dad had carried it everywhere, constantly making notes, drawing diagrams, muttering about getting the sequence right. Isabella had always mocked it, calling it his book of failures. With trembling hands, I picked it up. The leather was worn soft from years of use, the pages dog-eared and coffee-stained. As I opened it, a letter fell out, addressed to me in my father's messy handwriting. My dearest Sarah, it began. If you're reading this, something has happened to me. I need you to know that everything I've worked for, everything I've sacrificed, it wasn't for nothing. The formulas in this notebook, they work. The molecular stabilization sequence is complete. But there are people who would kill for this technology, people who wouldn't understand the importance of using it ethically. That's why I could never tell Isabella or go public before it was ready. My hands started shaking as I read further. The failed experiments Isabella had mocked. They were preliminary tests for a revolutionary carbon capture technology, a process that could literally pull greenhouse gases from the atmosphere and convert them into clean energy. If this worked, it would be worth billions, maybe trillions. But more importantly, it could help save our dying planet. As I read through the notebook, my scientific training kicking in, I realized Dad had done it. The formulas were elegant, the science sound. He'd solved problems that had stumped researchers for decades. This wasn't the work of a failure. This was genius. A noise outside startled me. Headlights swept across the windows as a car pulled up. Panic gripped me as I remembered Isabella's words. She was sending people to clear out the lab. They were early. I had to act fast. I saw Dad's old laptop on his desk. He'd always told me it contained his most important files. Grabbing it and the notebook, I looked frantically around the lab. What else would they destroy? What else did I need to save? The sound of voices outside spurred me into action. I spotted Dad's external hard drives in a drawer. Those two went into my bag. Then I noticed a small safe under his desk, one I'd never seen before. The combination. What would Dad have used? More voices, closer now. Keys jingling. With trembling fingers, I tried my birthday. Nothing. The handle of the front door started to turn. Mom's birthday? No. The door opened. In desperation, I tried the date Dad had first shown me, the periodic table, our special day, he called it. The safe clicked open. Hello? A man's voice called from the front room. Dr. Chen. Inside the safe was a single USB drive, labeled FALSAFE in Dad's handwriting, and a small stack of papers that looked like patent applications. I grabbed everything, shoved it in my bag, and looked around frantically for an escape route. The back door. Dad always kept it unlocked for emergency exits during dangerous experiments. I slipped out just as flashlights beamed through the main lab space. In the darkness, I ran to my car, parked around the corner. As I drove away, I saw men in dark suits entering the lab, carrying boxes and equipment. Isabella wasn't just clearing out the lab, she was searching it. She knew. That night, instead of going to my apartment, I checked into a small motel under a fake name. I couldn't risk Isabella's people finding me, not until I understood exactly what I had. Setting up Dad's laptop, I began to dig through his files. What I found kept me awake until dawn. Would you like me to continue with part 2, where we see what Sarah discovers and how she begins to fight back against her stepmother's empire? The next morning, my hands still shaking from what I'd discovered, I made 3 crucial phone calls. The first was to Dr. Marcus Zhang, my father's old colleague from MIT who'd mysteriously retired the same year Isabella forced Dad out of the mansion. The second was to Maya Patel, my best friend from graduate school who now ran a prestigious environmental law firm. The third was to James Wilson, my ex-boyfriend who happened to be one of Silicon Valley's most successful venture capitalists. Sarah Chen. James answered on the first ring, surprise evident in his voice. We hadn't spoken since our breakup 2 years ago, when he'd chosen his career over our relationship. I heard about your father. I'm so sorry. James, I need your help, I said, cutting straight to the point. But first, I need you to sign an NDA. An hour later, I sat in a private conference room at James' office, watching his face as he reviewed my father's data. His expression shifted from skepticism to shock to something approaching awe. Sarah, he trailed off, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. This isn't just revolutionary. This changes everything. The carbon capture efficiency rates alone are 10 times better than anything currently on the market. And the energy conversion process, he looked up at me, eyes wide. Your father actually solved it. Yes, I said quietly, but there's more. I showed him the files I'd spent all night decoding. Dad hadn't just developed the technology, he'd documented every attempt Isabella and Chen Industries had made to steal his research over the past 5 years. Email threads, recorded conversations, surveillance footage, he kept everything. She tried to force him to hand over the patents, I explained, pulling up a particularly damning email chain. When he refused, she started spreading rumors about his mental stability, cut off his funding, and eventually kicked him out. But she never stopped trying to get her hands on his research. James whistled low. This is corporate espionage. Serious stuff. He paused, studying me. What do you need from me? Investment capital. Enough to set up a new company and fast-track the development. Maya's already working on securing the patents in my name. Dad had filed the preliminary paperwork before he died. But we need to move quickly, before Isabella realizes what she's lost. Before James could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Maya, 911. Turn on CNBC now. James grabbed the remote, switching on the conference room's wall-mounted TV. Isabella's perfectly composed face filled the screen as she stood at a podium in front of Chen Industries headquarters. It is with great pride that I announce Chen Industries' breakthrough in carbon capture technology, she was saying, her voice smooth as silk. My late husband's final project has yielded remarkable results, and we expect to begin implementation within the month. My blood ran cold. She was trying to claim Dad's research as her own. That's why they were searching the lab, I whispered. They're going to try to recreate his work. James's phone chirped. Chen Industries' stock was already soaring on the announcement, but I noticed something in Isabella's press conference, something that made me lean forward. The molecular stabilization sequence, she was explaining to the reporters, allows for unprecedented carbon capture rates. But her description was wrong. Completely wrong. They didn't have Dad's real research, they had whatever fragmentary notes they'd found in the lab, and they were bluffing. My phone rang. Dr. John. I saw the press conference, he said without preamble. She's desperate, Sarah. Chen Industries is in trouble. They've been covering up massive losses for years, using creative accounting to hide their failed projects. Your father knew. That's why Isabella wanted his research so badly. She needs a win to keep the company afloat. A plan began forming in my mind. Dr. Zhang, how quickly can you put together a research team? For David's daughter, give me 48 hours. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity. While Isabella basked in the media attention, we worked in secret. James secured us lab space in an unmarked facility outside the city. Maya filed patents and trademarks under a series of shell companies to avoid detection. Dr. Zhang assembled a team of brilliant scientists who'd all been pushed out of Chen Industries over the years. But we had a problem. While we had Dad's research, we needed proof that Isabella had actively tried to steal it. The evidence on Dad's laptop wasn't enough. We needed recent documentation of their corporate espionage. That's when Vanessa's greed proved useful. My stepsister called me out of the blue, her voice syrupy sweet. Sarah, darling, I've been thinking about how awful we've been to you. Let me make it up to you over lunch. I knew it was a trap, but I accepted it anyway. The restaurant she chose screamed old money, all dark wood and crystal chandeliers. Vanessa was already there, wearing what probably cost more than my yearly salary. I feel terrible about how things ended at the funeral, she began, signaling for wine. And I want to help you. Help me? Of course. I know things must be difficult for you now, financially speaking. And well, she leaned forward conspiratorially. I know you have something Mother wants. Something from your father's lab? Ah, there it was. If you help us recreate your father's research, Mother's willing to be very generous. 7 figures generous. I took a sip of wine, buying time. And if I refuse? Vanessa's smile turned sharp. Don't be difficult, Sarah. Mother always gets what she wants, one way or another. What she didn't know was that I was recording every word. That afternoon, I met with Maya to review the recording. It's good, she said, but we need more. We need proof that Isabella knows her announcement was false. I might be able to help with that, a quiet voice said from the doorway. We turned to find Lisa, Isabella's personal assistant, standing there nervously. I've worked for Mrs. Chen for 10 years, she continued. I've seen things, done things, but claiming Dr. Chen's research, that's too far. I have documents, internal memos, emails, recordings of meetings where she explicitly discusses stealing his work. Maya's eyes lit up. Would you be willing to testify? Lisa nodded. Dr. Chen was kind to me. He deserved better. The pieces were falling into place, but we had to move fast. Chen Industries was already accepting pre-orders for their non-existent carbon capture technology. They'd announced a demonstration for major investors in 1 week. It was time to spring our trap. Are you sure about this? James asked as we prepared for the final phase. Once we do this, there's no going back. I thought about my father working alone in his lab, refusing to give up his principles even when it cost him everything. Unsure, I said. Let's end this. Would you like me to continue with part 3, where Sarah executes her plan and confronts Isabella at the investor demonstration? The day of Chen Industries' big demonstration dawned bright and clear. The company had rented out San Francisco's most prestigious convention center, and the media presence was overwhelming. News vans lined the street, reporters jostling for position as the world's most powerful investors arrived. I watched the live stream from our own facility, where Dr. Zhang and our team were making final adjustments to the real carbon capture prototype. We'd worked around the clock for 2 weeks, fueled by coffee and determination to bring my father's vision to life. Everything's ready, James said, adjusting his tie. As planned, he was attending the demonstration as a potential investor. Maya's team is in position, and the SEC agents are standing by. I nodded, checking my phone. A text from Lisa. She's nervous. Been practicing her speech all morning. Keeps changing the technical details. Of course she was nervous. Isabella was about to attempt explaining technology she didn't actually have. Mrs. Chen, a reporter's voice came through the live stream. Your company's stock has risen 300% since announcing this breakthrough. What do you say to skeptics who claim the technology isn't possible? Isabella's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. I say wait until the demonstration. My late husband's genius will speak for itself. I felt my blood boil at her casual appropriation of Dad's work, but I forced myself to stay calm. Everything depended on timing. At exactly 2 p.m., Isabella took the stage. The convention center was packed with investors, media, and tech industry elite. Vanessa sat in the front row, looking smug. Ladies and gentlemen, Isabella began. Today marks a historic moment in the fight against climate change. Chen Industries' revolutionary carbon capture technology will transform our world. She launched into her presentation, and I had to admire her acting skills. She spoke confidently about molecular bonds and energy conversion rates, delivering the carefully memorized script flawlessly. But I could see the panic in her eyes when questions started coming from the audience. Could you explain the stabilization process in more detail? One scientist asked. Isabella's smile flickered. Of course, the process involves specialized molecular sequencing. But how do you prevent degradation during the conversion phase? Another expert pressed. Our proprietary technology, Isabella started, but she was floundering. That's when James stood up. Perhaps a demonstration would be more convincing. Isabella's relief was palpable. Yes, absolutely. If you'll direct your attention to the main chamber. The massive machine behind her hummed to life. It was impressive looking, I had to give them that, all gleaming metal and pulsing lights. But I knew it was just for show. As you can see, Isabella continued, the carbon dioxide is being extracted from the air and converted to. The machine made a horrible grinding sound, then sparked dramatically. Emergency alarms began blaring. Minor technical difficulty, Isabella assured the murmuring crowd. Our engineers will. Or maybe, I said loudly, standing up from my place at the back of the hall. The machine doesn't work because you stole incomplete research and tried to recreate technology you don't understand. The room fell silent. Isabella's face went pale as I walked toward the stage. Sarah, she hissed, what are you doing here? Isn't it obvious, Mother? I continued, my voice carrying in the quiet room. I'm here to demonstrate my father's actual technology. Security. Vanessa shouted, but before anyone could move, the convention center's doors opened. Maya strode in, followed by a team of FBI agents and SEC officials. Isabella Chen, she announced, you're under investigation for corporate fraud, espionage, and securities manipulation. This is ridiculous, Isabella sputtered. I have proof. Documents. Forged documents, Lisa said, stepping forward. I should know. You made me create them. The next hour was chaos. While FBI agents secured Chin Industries' fake prototype as evidence, Maya presented our documentation of Isabella's fraud. The emails, the recordings. Maya's team verified the transfer. With Isabella's shares, I now controlled what remained of Chen Industries. The company that had once cast out my father was now mine. The irony wasn't lost on me. The next year brought changes I could never have imagined. Chen Sustainable Technologies installed our first large-scale carbon capture facility in California, with dozens more planned worldwide. The technology worked better than even Dad had predicted, giving real hope in the fight against climate change. Vanessa took a plea deal and served community service at an environmental cleanup organization. The experience seemed to change her. She later started a nonprofit focused on sustainable fashion. Lisa, Isabella's former assistant, became my trusted chief of staff, her organizational skills helping us manage our rapid growth. Isabella served 3 years in a minimum security prison. Upon release, she moved to a small house in Montana, about as far from her former lifestyle as possible. She sends me letters sometimes full of regret and attempted explanations. I read them, but rarely respond. On the first anniversary of Dad's death, I visited his grave early in the morning. The simple headstone stood in stark contrast to the ornate Chen family plot nearby. We did it, Dad, I said softly, placing fresh flowers by the stone. Your work is helping people, changing things, just like you always wanted. That afternoon, I had a board meeting in our new headquarters. The company had grown to over 1,000 employees, and our market value had reached $50 billion. But before heading into the meeting, I stopped by my office and opened Dad's old notebook, now carefully preserved in a glass case. Inside on the last page were words he'd written years ago. Success isn't measured in dollars or acclaim, but in the positive change we create. Remember that, Sarah. I did remember. Every day, as I stood looking out over the city, I thought about legacy. Isabella had built her empire on deception, desperate to maintain the appearance of success. Dad had worked in a humble lab, focused only on making his dreams reality. In the end, truth and dedication had won out over lies and manipulation. Real change had triumphed over empty promises. My phone buzzed. Another international contract, this time from India. More opportunities to implement Dad's technology to reduce carbon emissions, to make a difference. I smiled, touching the simple locket I always wore, the one containing a small piece of paper from Dad's notebook. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from destroying others, but from staying true to your principles and letting your work speak for itself. Dad taught me that, and it was the most valuable inheritance he could have left me. The world was changing, and thanks to him, I was helping change it for the better. That, I knew, would have made him prouder than all the billions in the world.